Sit back, it's time to get groovy. Question, do you remember that movie?
Welcome back to Remember That Movie. I am the third Alejandro Rosa on IMDb. Unfortunately, due to some technical issues, this episode will have no video. Except for this video. But after this, there will be no video. So, it'll just be audio of our conversation. Hopefully, next time we won't have any problems and you'll be able to look at our beautiful faces that our mothers said were made for radio. Welcome back to Remember That Movie. I am the third Alejandro Rosa on IMDb.
And I am Steve Johnston, and I am not on IMDb.
And this is a podcast where we look at the films of the past with the eyes of today. In this particular episode, we're going to turn the dial way back to 1949. But I'm going to pause right there because this film was picked by Steve, and it's very special to him, and he will tell us the tale. So, Steve, what is our feature presentation?
Today we are looking at Carol Reed's film noir masterpiece, The Third Man. The film did come out in 1950 in the United States. However, it debuted in September of 1949 in Europe. This movie was a favorite of my dad's. We liked it so much that we recorded the audio track of the movie onto a cassette tape. On nights when the weather was good, we would sit outside on the back porch, have a little fire going in the little fire pit, and this soundtrack would be playing on a little portable stereo that we took out. So we'd be chatting and having fun, but the strains of The Third Man would be playing in the background. I've watched this movie a handful of times, but I've heard this movie dozens of times. 30 years ago, I could probably recite the entire script verbatim. Sadly, I cannot do that anymore, but I did find myself doing what you have done in the past with movies that you've watched and kind of forgotten, where you suddenly go, oh, I remember this. I started remembering every scene, I just couldn't remember which order they went in. This movie holds a special place in my heart. I loved it then for a certain set of reasons, and spoiler alert, I love it now for additional reasons.
I do think, for clarity's sake, I would like to point out that Steve's father is still very much alive.
Oh, did I say was?
It was your dad's favorite. It sounded like, when my father was alive.
No, my dad is very much alive. This is one of his favorite films. At least I assume it still is one of his favorite films.
We'll find out. He'll be in the comments.
That is my history with the movie. Alejandro, what is your history with this movie?
I had never heard about this film until we talked about it several years ago. And that is my only experience with the film until last night, when I watched it for the very first time. You had described it to me in that episode, and it has been so long since we recorded that episode that I barely remembered what we talked about with the film. I knew it was in Europe. I knew it was a kind of a mystery, but the details had kind of left me. To start us out, why don't you give us the Steve nutshell version of what this film is about?
Steve's plot in a nutshell.
Not plot.
No.
That's a different podcast.
Much like your skin bats, I am vetoing that one.
I still stand by skin bats. For any understanding of that, please listen to our Beastmaster episode.
Yeah. The Third Man. American pulp fiction writer Holly Martins arrives in post-World War II Vienna. His childhood friend, Harry Lime, has offered him a job, but Martin finds that Lime has been killed, run over in a tragic accident. After attending the funeral, Martins begins to look into the accident, hoping to make sense of it all, only to find that people's stories aren't matching up. Determined to get to the truth, Martins falls into a plot of black markets, murder, and deceit, culminating in a frantic chase through the Vienna sewers, where Martins confronts a very much alive Harry Lime, and only one will survive.
Steve, when was the last time you actually watched this film?
It would have to be somewhere between 25 and 30 years ago at this point. I actually don't remember. Part of that is because I don't recall whether I watched it last or listened to it last. And then I don't remember where I was when whichever one of those occurred. So it's been a while.
Well, you don't remember what you were doing 30 years ago?
Not No.
Steve, tell the people who is in this movie, because I recognized one name, a very famous name, to be fair. Otherwise, I didn't know any of the other actors. And honestly, even the one name that I recognized, because he didn't make an appearance for quite a while, I was like, do I not know what he looks like? Because I thought I did. I was like, did I miss him?
When he finally showed up, did you go, oh, yes, I was right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. When they did the reveal of him, I was like, there it is. So, to help me and the audience, who is in this movie?
We're going to start with Joseph Cotten, who played the lead Holly Martins. Joseph Cotten had worked with Wells on several movies prior to this, including Citizen Kane, Wells's first movie in which he acted, wrote, directed, and generally considered one of the best films ever made. They were actually friends off-screen, with Cotten being Wells's best man at one of his weddings. Playing Harry Lime, we have Orson Welles, as I mentioned before, Academy Award winner and Grammy Award winner, which I did not know, for a spoken word album.
That's how actors get Grammys.
Playing the love interest, Harry Lime's girlfriend and Holly Martin's kind of interest as the film goes on, Anna Schmidt. We have Alida Valli, who is an Italian actor. She has starred in over 100 films, over a 70-year career, most of which you've never heard of because most of them are in Italian. Then some names that I do not expect you to recognize. Trevor Howard, who played Major Calloway, English actor, Academy Award nominee. He actually appeared later in life in Superman as the first Krypton elder who tells Jor-El off for raising panic amongst the populace.
Wow.
And then for the keen-eyed amongst you out there, Sergeant Payne, Major Calloway's kind of right-hand man, was played by a younger Bernard Lee. Have you watched the James Bond films? Are you familiar with them at all?
I am useless at trivia night when it comes to James Bond.
Bernard Lee is probably most famous for playing M in 11 James Bond films over the course of his career.
Wow.
And then we have a collection of names that I have to admit I do not recognize because they are Austrian actors and German actors to kind of fill out the cast.
There you go, folks. That's it. There is his, what do you call it?
My Achilles heel?
Steve's deficiency, Austrian films. Unbelievable.
I do want to mention their names just because they do a fantastic job in the movie. We have Paul Horbiger, who plays the porter at Harry Lime's residence. Ernst Deutsch plays Baron Kurtz, one of Harry Lime's friends, who plays the violin in his off time. Eric Ponto, who plays Dr. Winkel, another one of Harry Lime's friends. Siegfried Breuer, who plays Popescu. And one of my personal favorites, Wilfred Hyde-White, who plays Crabin, the very British character. The head of the cultural club.
I enjoyed him thoroughly. Yes.
He was wonderful. I'm assuming that the person that you recognized thought you had remembered wrong and then recognized once you did see him was Orson Welles.
It was absolutely Orson Welles, yes. I'm going to admit something on this podcast, on this movie podcast, talking about deficiencies. I have never seen Citizen Kane.
Citizen Kane's fun because it's his directorial debut. And essentially what happened is that the Hollywood studio had heard the Mercury Theatre performances, War of the Worlds, things of that nature, and basically said to him, hey, here's a bunch of money. Make a couple films. As long as you don't go over budget, you have total control over whatever you want to do. And with that, he made Citizen Kane. I don't blame you for not watching Citizen Kane. It's kind of an undertaking. It's one of those movies that you have to go, all right, I am going to sit down and watch this.
Who made this movie?
So, we have an agreement between an American producer, David O. Selznick, and a British producer, Alexander Korda. They agree to work together on a couple of films. They introduce Carol Reed, who is a British director, to writer Graham Greene. And together in 1948, they make a movie called The Fallen Idol, which does very well. Graham Greene then goes on to write The Third Man, and he starts by writing a little novella to kind of work out the theming, the feel. He wants to get an idea for what this story is going to be. He visits Vienna takes tours of the city, and actually chats with some people about the underside of the city. From the novella, Greene then writes the script. Carol Reed looks at it and starts kind of figuring out who he wants. He wants Joseph Cotten, he wants Valli, and he wants Orson Welles. Joseph Cotten and Valli were under contract with David O. Selznick. Well, that's fantastic because he's the producer of the movie. So he turns to David and says, I want Cotten, Valli, and Welles. And Selznick says, you can have Cotten, you can have Valli. You are not, under any circumstances, getting Orson Welles. The funny thing is that Welles was not under contract with Selznick, so he didn't have any say in the matter, ultimately. And when he said no, Reed turned to Korda, the British producer, and said, I want Orson Welles, and Korda said, fantastic. So we actually have a movie, and I think this is the first time this has happened in a long time, where the director has the cast that he wants.
Yeah, usually we're talking about all the actors that didn't get this, or the director couldn't get this person, so there was a backup. Or the director was a backup. Is there any ideas of why did he say you can't have Orson Welles?
He wanted Noel Coward, I believe, who Reed knew of, but thought that he was absolutely the wrong choice for the role of Harry Lime.
Very cool.
Filming took place actually in Vienna over the course of 6 weeks, followed by some additional time in studios in England. One of the things that I love about this movie is the fact that all of the outside shots that you see are Vienna. Every street that you see, every building that you see the outside of is actually Vienna in 1949. All of those piles of rubble that they're climbing over,
yes,
those are damaged buildings from World War II that had not been cleaned up yet. So when Joseph Cotten shambles down a pile of bricks and hides in a burnt-out car, those are actually a gigantic pile of bricks and a burnt-out car from war.
I did note how they were filming actual places as opposed to sets. The streets, the alleys that he would run or walk in, even some of the staircases and stuff he went up and down. I'm like, oh, that's a real staircase. That's not a studio. The burnt out car is really dark because I didn't think about that, right? As any kind of movie watcher, I just assumed, yes, there's that prop car. But, wow. What about the intro? Because I found the intro kind of fascinating.
So the clips that you see are actual film footage from Vienna that Reed's crew captured while they were there. The whole premise of the city being divided into zones with each country having their own police force and then the sort of mix in the middle is historically accurate. I loved reading some of the stories where these military soldiers would go on patrol where there was one Frenchman, one British guy, one American, and one Russian, all in a Jeep, just driving around. And yeah, they spoke a little bit of German, and that's how they communicated, which was fun. So the images that you are seeing are actually Vienna, and the voiceover is our first director cameo.
Oh.
That is the voice of Carol Reed, who I always thought it was Calloway when I was younger, but it's not. It's the voice of some racketeer, some black market person who starts to tell this story just as an introduction to get you up to speed of, oh, here's this character, here's where he's coming to, this is sort of the state of the city, and go.
I love the use of language in this film. People speak in multiple languages, and unlike in modern films, no subtitles.
This was something that when I watched when I was younger, I didn't give it much thought. Watching it now, I realized that we are experiencing the story of the film in the same way that Holly Martins is experiencing it. We are dropped in this city. We do not speak the language. We don't know what's going on just as much as the character does not know what's going on. And I loved that. I thought that was fantastic. Did you like the fact that one of the very first things that Martins does is walk underneath a ladder?
I didn't catch that.
As he is approaching Harry Lime's house for the first time, he walks underneath a ladder that's been propped up.
That's great. I didn't catch that at all. It's such an interesting concept. Our lead character comes in, he's here to meet his friend, and the first thing that somebody says is, oh, he died.
Everyone just went to the funeral.
And you're kind of following along too, like, oh my gosh. What's happening in this movie? And then the next thing you know, you're at a funeral. It's like, oh, wow, what a fun way to start a movie.
There was a large cast of characters at the funeral. If it's your first time watching, you might not have paid much attention to exactly who was there. Every single person that's here is going to be involved in the rest of the plot.
The dynamics between the characters were very interesting because Holly is convinced something is wrong. This accidental death doesn't seem very accidental since everybody is telling a different story and he's trying to figure it out. What I kind of found interesting about the character is that he's not exactly our hero. He's not the most likable gentleman. I mean, early on in the film, he gets drunk and then tries to get into a fight with one of the officers. Because what is the name of our British captain or whatever?
Major Calloway.
Major Calloway. And Sergeant Payne, who is his right-hand guy, Holly, drunk, decides that he's going to punch the major and stands up to do it. And before he can do anything, Sergeant Payne punches him and he falls to the ground. And what is fascinating to me is that Sergeant Payne is one of the nicest characters in this entire film.
I love the fact that he decks him in the face, knocks him to the ground, and then bends over and says, "Oh, easy up there, sir," and helps him back to his feet.
And he's like, "Oh, I know your books. I've read your books." He was one of my favorite characters. He's pleasant, he's respectful, and then drives him to wherever he needs to be. And the major, of course, says, "Don't hit him again unless he misbehaves or something."
Yes.
I was laughing. I'm like, okay, that's really funny. And there is these moments of comedy in this film. They're very few and far between because it is pretty dark.
Towards the end of the movie, where the kindly old balloon seller suddenly arrives on the scene, approaches the policemen who are hiding in the shadows and just goes, "Balloon mine here?" And eventually, in order to get rid of him, Payne turns around and buys one.
When he was interviewing Dr. Winkel, he keeps saying, "I cannot give an opinion." And he says, "Well, what do you think about this? Do you think he was murdered?" And the line is, "I cannot give an opinion. The injuries to the head and skull would have been the same, whether he was murdered or not. Either he got hit by a car by accident or on purpose, they look the same." The music, Steve, is very bizarre in this film.
Bizarre?
I say that because sometimes the music is perky. At times when things are just kind of dark. I don't know how to describe that best, but You tell me, what are your thoughts on the music?
I love the music with one or two little exceptions. There are a couple of times where the music drops out and we have a moment of silence, and then there is some major plot point revealed, and then there is a sudden sting on the zither and it kind of slaps you upside the head. I thought that was a little heavy-handed personally, but overall I loved it. Whilst filming, Carol Reed went to a little cafe that served sausages and beer on a regular basis because it was close to the studio, and he noticed that there was this gentleman playing the zither just out by the tables to entertain the guests, basically have some music going while you sit and eat and chat. And he loved the sound of it. He thought that it encapsulated sort of the feeling of Vienna at the time. So he invited that zither player, Mr. Anton Karas, to his hotel, showed him some of the footage, and had him kind of figure out something to play on the zither just to see if it would work. And he loved the way it actually came together. So he ended up flying Mr. Karas back to England to do a proper recording, actually work out the full soundtrack. One of the things that makes this movie unique, and I think one of the reasons that my dad loves it, is that with the exception of one, maybe two scenes, the entire soundtrack is one man on a zither. Reed commented in an interview that it actually made the music production side of things really nice, because unlike working with a composer where you'd say, "Oh, okay, I want this sort of feeling here, and then I want it to build here," and then the composer goes away, comes back a couple weeks later, plays some stuff on the piano and goes, "This is where the kettle drums will come in, this is where the strings will crescendo." No, he had Anton Karas sitting next to him going, "Okay, how does this sound?" And just play something, goes, "Yep, that's it." And that is exactly what he got for the final product. I agree with you that there are times that it seems a little out of place, but I think overall it's amazing and works remarkably well.
But I think it does work. It was just a little odd. There is a discomfort in the film at times.
Yes.
Because again, we don't know what's happening. Neither does the character. There's a lot of Dutch angles in this. The camera is askew.
I'm actually glad that you said that and phrased it the way that you did, because that was Carol Reed's intent. The heavy use of Dutch angles and stark lighting and shadows was meant to make the audience feel slightly uncomfortable, like there's something not quite right with what I'm seeing. So it had the intended effect. I like that.
Oh, yeah, I totally got it. And again, it matched the character of Holly, who's constantly like, this isn't right. Something about this doesn't make any sense. And he's constantly trying to figure it out and just hitting like dead ends. I was like, okay, this is on purpose. It's working.
Yes.
It's working. I'm uncomfortable.
Working as intended. So what did you think of the reveal of Harry Lime when Orson Welles makes his first appearance?
I wish they hadn't used the cat.
Oh.
This is one of those moments where I think, oh, you were going so subtle, and then you hit us with a hammer.
Rather overt, yeah.
Yes. And that disappointed me because the rest of it had been pretty subtle. That the character that we have assumed is dead, that Holly has been looking for, is very much alive. And we discover this very much towards the end of the film when he reveals himself to Holly, as usual, in a dark alley kind of, But the thing that I said was heavy-handed was prior to that, his girlfriend had a cat. And Holly tried to play with the cat, and the cat was not having it. And she said that the only person who the cat liked was Harry. Give it about a few beats.
Yep.
And Holly is outside, and we see the cat, and the cat goes up to where somebody is standing in the dark, and the cat is all purrs and just having a good time. And at that point, I went, oh, he's alive. And that upset me because I didn't want it to be like that. I wanted the reveal to be with the light.
Okay.
Which, by the way, is actually still very fascinating to me. He's standing in the dark. Holly sees that there's a man there. He goes, who is it? Just show yourself or whatever.
Starts yelling, and this Austrian woman who's just trying to sleep starts yelling at him.
From an upstairs apartment and turns on the light. And then we reveal the face of the man. And then at some point she turns it off. And then he's in shadow again.
Yep.
Great reveal. The reveal part was good. If you had just skipped the cat, I would have liked more of the tension of who are you, and then we get the reveal. That was the only thing. But again, this film is famous and I'm not, so I guess they did it right. It's just my personal opinion. I will say, since we're on the subject,
yes,
I said earlier I had no idea when Orson Welles was going to show up, if I had missed him, or if he wasn't in this at all, and then he shows up. I have not seen a lot of Orson Welles. I feel like I've read more about Orson Welles than seen him.
I agreed. I think I'm in the same boat.
I think I've seen some bits of him when he was older, like with the beard, he was heavier set. But young Orson Welles, I have not seen a lot of. I've only read about him.
Okay.
And I remember thinking to myself, okay, that's Orson Welles. What's the big thing about Orson Welles? Right? He doesn't look like a lot. Like, no offense to Orson Welles. I mean, he's long past, though. He probably doesn't care. But you look at him and you're like, it's not Cary Grant. It's not any of these guys. His look is very different.
He's not sort of classically handsome.
No.
In the way that movie stars are, yeah.
No. But man, does that guy have a twinkle in his eye.
Oh, yeah.
When we get to a scene where Holly and Harry actually have a conversation, which is on a Ferris wheel.
Yes.
That's when I realized, oh, I see it now. This is why you're Orson Welles.
Yes.
He hadn't been in the movie that much. He had barely said anything. And he has this one main scene. And all I thought to myself was, he's great. All those people are right. This man is a talent. That combination between smart, mischievous, and always seemed like he was hiding something, again, the twinkle in the eye. I was just kind of taken in by him. I thought, wow, how charming is this man? Even though we've already heard horrible things about him. And we know he's done horrible things, and you don't want to like him.
He's a real villain.
Yes, Holly is technically the nice guy, and I care more about Harry. Because Orson Welles is so good that I'm just like, yeah, let him go. I'm kind of rooting for the bad guy here because the bad guy is cool as heck. I felt very conflicted.
Yes.
So I was like, but I like him. I don't want him to be caught by the police. It's a real Dexter Morgan situation for any fans of Dexter.
Oh, there you go. Yes.
Where you're just like, wait, I'm not supposed to be rooting for the bad guy.
So following their encounter at the Ferris wheel, Holly finally learns the truth of what Harry has been doing. Ultimately, he agrees to help Major Calloway capture Harry by inviting him to, come meet him at a cafe, and the police are going to be lying in wait.
Harry is hiding in the Russian section, and so the British forces are not going to go into the Russian section to get someone.
They can't do that. They have to lure him either into the international section or into the British section where they have some jurisdiction.
They're trying to use Holly as bait to lure him because Harry wants to be with Holly, wants to hang out with him, wants to be with his friend. So they're convincing him, do this for us so we can catch this guy or we'll never be able to catch him.
This scene where they have basically staked out the area around the cafe is one of my favorites because of the use of the Dutch angles and the use of shadows. I love the fact that we get several establishing shots of the exterior of buildings, of different parts of statuary that's around the place, and then all of a sudden a shadow moves and it turns out, it's one of the Russian military policemen. There is a dark area of shadow, and all of a sudden, Major Calloway turns around and is lit up. And then a soldier next to him turns around, and then Major Payne turns around, and suddenly you realize, wait, in what I thought was just this dark, shadowy alcove, there are 3 guys just lying in wait. And then we get a moment of tension, where they say, he's coming, because there is this enormous shadow of a man walking that has been cast up on the buildings, like a 3-story tall black shadow of a man walking along. It turns out that's the kindly old balloon seller for a moment of levity and breaking of the tension. And Harry has snuck in over the rubble into the back of the cafe. I love all of the hidden people that you kind of see in the shadows in that setup. So Holly is waiting in this cafe to meet with Harry when all of a sudden Anna arrives. And Harry and Anna start having a rather heated argument over what's going on and who is in the right.
I love this, by the way, because they're having an argument in the cafe and the police, who are all over the place, are in the shadows like, wait, what's going on over there?
They recognize her, and so eventually Sergeant Payne is sent over to find out what on earth she is doing there, fearing that she is going to blow the whole operation. While Anna and Holly are having this fight, Harry has snuck in the back door over a pile of rubble, unnoticed by the police, and he's listening to the argument. He turns to bolt, and right as he turns, that's when Sergeant Payne comes through the front door of the cafe and sounds the alarm, and we get the chase scene with Harry Lime running through the darkened streets of Vienna, hiding in shadows, trying to elude the police. Eventually, he opens up what is a very distinct sewer entrance. This star grate that opens one triangle at a time, runs down into the sewers, and then we get some absolutely gorgeous, intense footage of Harry hiding in the shadows of the sewers, the sounds of people running through the sewers, splashing the water, the military police yelling, shining lights this way and that, trying to find Harry Lime. The sewers themselves are mostly the actual sewers of Vienna. Harry Lime at one point scoots his way across the top of a waterfall, and then there's another shot of that same waterfall where some men duck underneath it into a tunnel. That is an actual overflow in the Vienna sewers. The main gallery, the gigantic vaulted area, is technically not part of the sewers, but is kind of connected. That's actually the River Vien that runs underneath Vienna and then meets up with the Blue Danube. Orson Welles was not a fan of shooting movies in the sewer.
What a shock. Why?
He basically said after being down in them for a little bit, it's like, I can't do this. I'm an American star. I can't be running around the sewers like this. So they got a couple of shots of him, one of which being running across the top of the waterfall. And then the shot where he's running down the main gallery and you just see his shadow getting smaller and smaller into the distance. And then every other scene with him in it, it's either a body double in the actual sewers or it's in a movie set that was constructed in England so that you could actually see his face. Now, that was done for a couple of reasons. Number one, because, Orson Welles didn't want to shoot in the actual sewers. But number two, the sewer exit that he attempts to get out of at the end does not exist. There is no sewer exit like that in Vienna. So some staging was needed. One of my favorite bits of this chase scene is when Harry Lime stops in the middle of a fairly open gallery and there are multiple exits, multiple tubes and tunnels that he could take. But he stands there and he shifts his head one way, and then we see one of the tunnel entrances and we hear voices coming out of it. And he looks panicked in another direction, same thing. A shot of a different tunnel, more voices yelling. That just triggered a moment of, oh, yeah, this is panic-inducing if you're trying to get away and you've got all of these sounds, all of these different exits. What does one do? He picks an exit, and he is making his way towards a spiral staircase that will lead him up and out of the sewers. I think the intent was that that was going to be an exit into the Russian sector. So if he can get out of that, great. He's free. Martins catches up with him. Calloway, very close behind. Sergeant Payne arrives as well, but makes the mistake of running across the sewer. And in that moment, Harry Lime shoots and kills Payne. A tragic death in the movie, if ever there was one, because he was the likable character.
Oh, I was so annoyed. I was like, why did you have to kill Payne?
Really?
He was the nice guy. Don't kill the nice guy.
Calloway gets a shot off, which injures Lime. And so now Harry Lime is stuck, staggering and pulling himself by his arms up this spiral staircase. And he gets to the top and he tries to lift the grate off. And this is where we get our second director cameo. Because the fingers that you see come up through the grate and then disappear are Carol Reed's. Because that is an actual sewer grate in Vienna. And Orson Welles had gone to England at that point. So he did the handwork. Martins grabs Sergeant Payne's pistol and chases after Harry.
Just to clarify, that's Holly. We've been calling him Holly the whole time, and you just called him Martins.
It's the whole Holly-Harry thing that I...
Oh, I know. It's terrible. Great job, Graham Greene.
So Holly grabs Sergeant Payne's pistol, runs after Harry. This is a scene that I have a new appreciation for because there was a lot of subtlety in it that I did not catch when I was younger. The fact that Harry has given up trying to get out of the sewer grate. He cannot lift it in his current state. He looks over his shoulders and meets eyes with Holly. He gives Holly a little nod. We then cut back to Calloway, who is looking over Payne's body. And this is where the producers stepped in just a little bit, because Calloway realizes that Holly's no longer there and says, for goodness sake, if you see him, shoot. And then you hear a shot ring out. There is a moment. And then Holly Martins comes back into the tunnel, having killed Harry Lime. That was not the way Carol Reed wanted it initially. He did not have Calloway yelling out at first. It was going to be a mercy killing where Holly was going to kill Harry just as a friend to help him avoid all of the stuff that would befall him if he were actually captured. They didn't think that would go over too well with the censors, just having one person killing another
Out of kindness.
So by having Calloway yell out, oh, for goodness sakes, if you see him, kill him, he's dangerous. Okay, now it's kind of in defense. We can get away with that and put that on the screen. Your thoughts on the sewer scene and its sort of climax at the end there?
I really liked it. I don't think it takes away from it because it still seemed like a mercy killing to me. It's the nod. It's the look he gives him like, help me. Because he's already shot. If they catch me, I'm going to prison.
When I was younger, I missed the nod or I didn't read into it, so I thought that it was just it's the good guy killing the bad guy. Watching now and taking note of the look in Orson Welles' eyes as he gives that little nod. It's like, okay, yeah, that's not the good guy shooting the bad guy that I thought it was.
That's the friend of 20 years saying help, which they make a very big point of. We've known each other for so long. And then we have the funeral scene.
We go from this very heavy, emotional death scene to a little bit of levity, because I don't know if you noticed, but it's the same priest that was officiating.
It's the same everything.
It's the same everything, except the priest, after taking the little scoop of dirt and throwing it on the casket, like annoyed, shoves it back into the little pile as if to say, I'm just done with this. It's
fantastic. It has the most fascinating bit of ending. So, really quick, the whole time Anna is weeping over Harry. Anna was Harry's girlfriend, and throughout the course of the film, he's dead, so she is mourning him. And at some point in there, you can totally tell that Holly is definitely getting interested in Anna, not reading the room, that she is mourning this man who she loved.
He's interested, and I apologize for interrupting, but I think up until the point that they discover Harry is alive, she starts being interested in him, because every now and then she slips and calls Holly Harry.
I don't think so. I don't
No.
think so. Nope. I disagree. Friendliness, yes. Finds him kind of charming, sure. But I don't think it's that kind of interest.
Okay.
I think they make that very consistent. I could be wrong. I'd have to watch it again. You've watched it multiple times.
This is true. Now, I do apologize for interrupting. You were explaining that poor Anna, her boyfriend has been killed, supposedly.
Yep.
She just finds out that, no, he's not dead.
Yes.
And then the person that she has been helping to kind of sort things out
And confiding in and all of that, yeah.
is the one who actually turns around and kills her boyfriend for real.
Yeah.
This
Well,
time.
first betrays him by trying to get him arrested.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So the first betrayal is you're trying to get him arrested. And the second betrayal is you kill him.
You killed him.
End of the funeral. Anna's walking away. Holly gets into the Jeep with the major and they start to drive off. He sees Anna and he gets out of the Jeep and he waits for her to walk towards him. And you think, are they going to have some kind of scene together? And my favorite bit in this movie is that she just keeps on walking and she doesn't even look at him. And I loved it.
I was hoping that you would, because this is one of my favorite movie ending shots of all time. The fact that we see him standing off to the side of the road waiting for her as she approaches, and she is a long way off from the camera when this starts.
It's a long shot.
And so we've got the zither music playing, we've got Holly Martin's waiting, we've got Anna Schmidt walking. She does not break stride, she does not glance in his direction, she just walks straight past him, straight past the camera. Fade to black.
I thought it was great. I thought it was a great ending.
In Graham Greene's original novella, the two of them actually do reconcile. David O. Selznick, the American producer, said, hey, can't we have the ending that's in the book? And Carol Reed stuck his ground saying, no, I don't think anything in life ends right. He
Ooh.
thought it would be very out of character for these two people to suddenly turn and reconcile and be okay with everything. Graham Greene, the writer, that was one of the few things that they actually butted heads over, but, quote, he has been proved triumphantly right in his decision to have the ending be a downer.
What was the reception of this film?
It depended on where you were. In the United Kingdom, it was a hit. It was the most popular movie of 1949 in the UK. In the United States, there was a slight delay. It didn't come out until the early part of 1950 because David O. Selznick decided to edit it down. He removed 11 minutes of footage and actually had Joseph Cotten re-record the opening introduction that plays over the shots of Vienna, just to make it a bit more agreeable to American audiences. He was not thrilled with the idea that our hero, as you mentioned earlier, is not really much of a hero. He's got his own problems. The American version that was ultimately released was a hit in America. There was one place, though, that it was not particularly popular. Do you have any guesses where that might be?
Austria?
Austria. The Austrians didn't care for it all that much. It only ran for about 4 weeks before leaving theaters. The reaction was a mix of, this is very depressing, and why would you choose to show the seedy underbelly of our beautiful city? Why did you have that be the focus of the story when there were so many other things that you could have done? So the Austrians at first did not care for it.
You do have to admit, it doesn't paint Austria in a great light. They talk about all the racketeering and all the stuff that's going on. What we see of Austria is a lot of rubble,
Yep.
a lot of dark alleys. Of course they're not happy with it. And even the Austrians who are in the film are secondary.
Yes.
So I kind of get it from Austria's perspective.
The other thing is that I kind of think it might have hit too close to home because the Vienna that you see in the film is the actual Vienna. That's slightly exaggerated, yes, but that's how things were. There were these racketeering and these black market trades going on in the post-war city. So it's kind of let's have all of the bad things about the city. Let's just put those on display. I don't really want to watch that. I live it.
It's almost like, oh, you're a little too soon?
Yeah,
Too soon to be doing this.
exactly. Did very well everywhere except Austria. It won an Academy Award For the best cinematography, Mr. Robert Krasker was the cinematographer, and he is the one responsible for putting together all of the marvelous Dutch angles that you see. It won the BAFTA for Best British Film, and it won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival that year. And then, in 1999, the British Film Institute voted this the #1 British film of all time. The film also has a couple of very famous fans, one of which is Roger Ebert. He remembers visiting Paris and ducking into a cinema that was showing The Third Man, and watching this film made him fall in love with movies, or that's roughly the quote that he said. So this is a very special film to him as well. I like the fact that Carol Reed was a friend with William Wyler, an American director, would direct Ben-Hur a little ways down the line. But he saw the film and sent Carol a gift. He sent him a little spirit level and said, "Carol, next time you make a picture, just put this on top of the camera, will you?"
That's awesome.
So yes, that is The Third Man, a film that I very much loved when I was younger, and now love even more because I started noticing things that escaped me when I was but a youth. I don't know how much film noir you typically partake in, if you're a fan of the genre, if you kind of watch a couple here and there. What did you think?
Not that I'm not a fan of film noir. I can't say that I'm well versed in it. I don't think I've seen a lot of it. So this was very different for me. I will say going into it, I was concerned that I wasn't going to like it, but I found myself very entertained and very intrigued. Even the over-the-top moments, I was still like, you're forgiven, because the rest of it was so good and it was so subtle. I loved how interesting it was. I loved how Anna did not end up being a classic romantic partner for our lead. I was so taken by that because she was very complex. She was three-dimensional. She had her own things. She had her own career. She had her own trauma. She had her own backstory, most of which we were not told about. And I really liked what a complex character she was. And that at the end, there was no love interest with Holly. Her love of Harry was a love. It was a genuine care for, we'd been in a relationship. I just love how that didn't get changed into anything.
Yes. Excellent.
So I really enjoyed that. And I just enjoyed the kind of the ride, that the movie takes us on.
Excellent.
Well, it's a great film. I mean, okay, fine. British film industry, you're right. It's pretty good.
In that case, I will pass the baton to you, sir. What is it we are going to watch next?
What would complement a 1949 film noir set in Austria in black and white better than if I said, let's go to 1985. Let's go color, but let's not just go color. Let's go animated.
Ooh.
So we will be doing the 1985 animated fantasy family film, The Black Cauldron.
Ah.
This film was requested by my wife several months ago, and we're doing it because it is her birth month in September. And so I thought, what a wonderful way to honor her than to finally listen and do what she asked me to do many, many months ago.
If I've understood correctly, as a birthday present to your wife, we are going to record a podcast episode that she will probably never listen to.
You're absolutely right. She will not be listening to it. But she has considered joining us for this particular episode.
Ah, wonderful.
Not sure if she's going to do it or not. Everyone stay tuned to see if she joins us for our next episode.
I'll run out and buy a red carpet.
But then you'll have to mail it.
Oh, that's true.
The Black Cauldron.
Sit back, it's time to get groovy. Question, do you remember that movie?